Welcome to the Hollywood Outsider, an award-winning weekly entertainment podcast. For this episode, we're heading right into the danger zone to discuss how 80s soundtracks took our breath away. Then we're taking flight with Top Gun Maverick, and even take a look at Stranger Things Season 4. The heat is on, so against all odds, let's get on with the hoe, which is the best around. Is there a way to work Xanadu into this? No? All right, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to stop us now.
Flash.
This is embarrassing. I can't decide if this is too cheesy or if this is right on par or if I love it. There's a lot of mixed emotions I have right now.
Care. That's what I've got to say. My name is Aaron Peterson. Joining me today are my fellow host Amanda Sink.
Hello, hello.
And Troy Heinrichs.
This podcast is all about the power of love this week.
That's the power of love. That was this whole episode, all it did was drop me down a well of 80s soundtracks that I used to listen to. And I realized that I used to listen to a lot more music than I do currently.
I also feel like this episode is going to be the true test of our ability to not get sued.
Don't play any recordings, I mean,
or sing too long.
You got to be careful. I don't know what the rules are. I don't want to get busted over it.
You could state the lyric, you just can't sing the lyric, and then the bot won't be able to pick you up.
I realized that I'm a little older than I would like because I had several that I'm like, that's an 80s movie. That's an 80s movie. And they weren't.
Nope.
I'm like, pump up the volume. No, that's 1990. Damn it. Young Guns 2. No, 1990. Damn it. And then New Jack City. Nope, that's a couple years away. I'm like, I don't even remember anymore, which was the 80s. I had to look everything up.
The 90s did have a lot of good music in their movies too.
Well, that's what I think I was most surprised by, is that I just assumed, because that was the era that I listened to most music, so that must mean that I only listen to 80s music, but apparently there's a lot of 90s in there too. Probably a lot more 90s.
Yeah, but the 90s, the 80s was good music, but the 90s had like memorable music. 80s was all like one-hit wonders.
That's true. I found a lot of songs that I loved, but not soundtracks that I listened to.
Well, and honestly, even for the soundtracks that we're going to talk about today, a lot of them are a few songs that stand out, one or two songs that really stand out, and the rest are just like a pretty cliche 80s soundtrack, like to get the 80s vibes across. But honestly, and this may just be for me, but when I listen to those 80s soundtracks, I'm like, there's one or two really memorable songs on the soundtracks, and the rest are kind of just like, it's good 80s music, whatever.
And all of it wasn't even 80s music. There's some
That's true.
collections from other eras and stuff, but it's an 80s soundtrack and it counts. And you know what we're already talking about? We might as well just leap into it because we're doing a weird episode where there's really nothing newsworthy to talk about. Hunger Games getting a prequel. Woo-hoo, who cares? So we're going to just dive right into it.
Everything gets a prequel these days.
Yeah, it does. It does, right?
Apparently, Aaron's speaking for all of us. Troy and I don't get to decide if we're excited about a Hunger Games prequel, but that's fine. It's fine.
Do you want a Hunger Games prequel?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
See, I'm speaking.
Nobody wanted the fourth movie either.
Honestly,
make it that way.
wasn't the excitement about Hunger Games the actual Hunger Games? Why would I care about things when they're not apocalyptic or problematic? I care about the drama. In survivalist mode. I don't care about, whoa, sad, life is sad. We're going to have to compete to survive. I don't care about that stuff.
I don't need the origin story of how the Hunger Games came to fruition. That seems weird.
They kind of also give you a little bit of insight anyway, like enough where you feel like you have knowledge to get through it. You don't need more than that.
I don't remember after the second movie anymore because the third and fourth,
because they weren't that great.
Yeah, they weren't. Catching Fire was great, and then it just it was like Goose, just ejected.
I knew. I was hoping one of you guys were going to make that reference because I couldn't make that conscious joke.
Poor Goose. All right, so we are going to talk about 80s soundtracks. Then we're going to talk about Top Gun Maverick, and then Amanda's going to leave because she hasn't finished the Volume 1 of Stranger Things, and then Troy and I are going to talk about that.
Volume 4.1?
It's so weird that Can we agree that they didn't need to split this up?
Can we agree that we're just tired as shit of all of these series getting split into two parts? Like, if you're going to do that, wouldn't it just be a different season?
Just go week to week.
I disagree with all of it. I think the issue is that they can't keep doing the binge model because you hit it and quit it and you forget about the property and nobody talks about it.
Exactly why. Yep.
And the problem is that there isn't a good balance. And I really, really enjoyed what's been happening lately, where like Amazon Prime dropped 3 episodes of Mrs. Maisel, Star Wars. Disney dropped 2 episodes of Star Wars as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think 3 episodes a week for 4 weeks, I think is really great, because then I can like pay for my 1 month of $15.99 or whatever the price is and quit and still feel like I was in the zeitgeist and followed along and kept up with everybody.
Now that we've just completely derailed the conversation from 80s soundtrack, let me just add, I am in complete disagreement with you, Troy. Logically, cognitively, I want to agree with you, and I want to say that I would love
you
to
and
go
your
back.
$4 word. Cognitively?
I don't have any cognitive. I watched like, I don't know how many hours of TV this weekend because I had to binge it all.
But I have gotten so used to the binge model personally that even for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I never went back to it because there wasn't the release, like the whole thing. And so I get less invested into a show if I can't just complete it, because I want to be able to complete things, because for so long I was unable to complete things. Now I'm like, I just want to get it done.
Can't you just
and then
wait?
I'll rewatch it later.
Can't you just wait until it's all there?
The week the last episode comes out.
I lose interest by then.
That sounds like a you problem. That's what
it is a me problem, but I can't imagine I'm alone.
No, I'm sure you're not alone.
I know a lot of people that will wait until like episode 10 drops, and then they'll start binging like 2 days before that, so that they're literally done at the same time as everybody else.
And that makes sense. But by the time week 10 or week 4 comes around, I have forgotten about your show because there's 13 other shows that have released new episodes or an entirely brand new show or new movies or something. And honestly, I don't feel like there has not been a significant markup of conversation or lingering talk about a TV show that has broken up into 2 parts specifically. Like Ozark, they did that. It didn't make any difference for the show. People still only talked about it for 2 days because they finished the show in a day or 2. And then that was it. Nobody talked about it anymore. So it really did not make that much of a difference. It just made it stupid that they put season 4 part 1 and season 4 part 2.
This is their way. They're going to get you with the 7 episodes of Stranger Things they just dropped. And then you're going to come back. You're going to rewatch. A lot of people are going to rewatch those 7 episodes before the volume 2 drops, so they can get refreshed for the 2 episodes that are remaining that equal 4 hours, which is 4 episodes where I come from. And but no, it's like 2 episodes. One's 2.5 hours long. One's an hour and a half long. That's 4 hours. That's 4 episodes.
It's Stranger Things, the movie part 1 and Stranger Things, the movie part 2.
Yeah, right?
That's an extended movie like and then a regular movie.
Yeah, it's like Mission Impossible part 1.
The
Mission
Fear
Impossible
Street
part 2.
trilogy.
Dune part 1 and Dune part 2.
Crazy. Well, you know what? Let's get into this stuff because that's what people want to hear. So we're already talking about it. We might as well get into it. But before we do that, we got to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 2, because the world's favorite blue hedgehog is back in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, now available on digital. In this next level sequel, Sonic and Tails must save the world from Dr. Robotnik's evil plans. You can buy Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and watch it today. It's rated PG from Paramount Pictures. I know a lot of people that love this franchise and love this second movie, so definitely check it out. And Jim Carrey said it might be his last movie. I don't know, so that's more incentive, I guess. I don't know. And we are giving away 5 copies of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to some lucky listeners. So if you're interested in entering, contests at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. That's contests at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. You can send us an email with your name and you'll be entered into a drawing to win one of 5 digital codes. But you don't have to wait. Go get it now. Go. Go as fast as Sonic goes. No? I tried. Also, Patreon. If you want to support a show that's independently funded, you can go to patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. That's patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. You can sign up for any tier you want. You get bonus programming and content there. And Ken in Chicago, just a little shout out. That's where you make requests, my friend. Right there.
I was just thinking that.
That's where you make requests. Patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. All right, let's get to our From the Outside In topic. As we alluded to, we are talking about 80s soundtracks. With Top Gun reigniting the 80s, I mean, he brought Danger Zone back in that movie, which was exciting to hear Kenny Loggins again because he was the king of the 80s. And we're going to talk a little bit about 80s soundtracks as a whole. And if you really think on it, I would argue because I'm from that era, that the 80s had the best era of movie soundtracks, or at least definitely songs, but had a lot of fantastic soundtracks, with the original Top Gun right at the top. And I spent a lot of time looking at different various polls of the top soundtracks of the 80s, and it seems Top Gun is right there at the top. Danger Zone, Take My Breath Away. You know, it's probably neck and neck with Dirty Dancing for the top spot, mostly because they let Patrick Swayze sing. We don't know why, but they did. And first, I want to define what a soundtrack is, because that seems to be a little bit of confusion for a lot of people. A soundtrack is a collection of songs that put you in the movie's mood, that are from the movie or about the movie or reflect the movie, not necessarily a score. It's not about a score. It's about the songs that are collected on a soundtrack. And Stand By Me is a great example, because Stand By Me is a film that had a fantastic soundtrack, but the songs weren't actually from that era, but they reflected the movie that they were telling, the story that they were telling. So it's a great soundtrack. Everybody agree on that? Or does anybody feel different about that? How do you feel?
No, I feel like that's pretty wrong. A soundtrack can still encompass like just orchestral music that is a score. I think the difference in what we're talking about is we are not referring to a score soundtrack, because there are some movies where they don't have songs, they only have a score, which is just the actual music. This has lyrical accompaniment with the sound of the music, the instruments. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a movie soundtrack that has the songs with lyrics that, like Aaron's talking about, describe the movie, talk about the movie, reflect the movie, just get you in the mood for the movie.
In the mood.
Yeah, but I think that we can still say that there's soundtracks that exist that don't have lyrical songs. They just have a score.
They got to have some songs for me. I can't just, if it's just the score, then that's just the score. To me, I don't.
But it's still a soundtrack.
Maybe, but in my brain, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. Soundtrack to me is a collection of songs. It's the track of sounds with words. I don't know. That's just how my brain defines it. But that's what we are talking about it.
I think people blend it these days, though, because sometimes I think in the past it was the soundtrack was only the songs that were sung by artists that you could hear on the radio.
Right.
And then the musical score was like a 2-volume of all the instrumentals.
They always called it.
I think today
score.
They started to blend them together a little bit. You might get 2 or 3 or 4 of the big hits mixed in with some of the background music that's on that particular album. I think what's interesting about music in the movies specifically is that there's like 2 different types of music. There's something called diegetic music. This is music that's actually heard, like the characters actually hear the music in the movie. So think like I'm driving in the car and I pop a song on the radio, or when Marty McFly wakes up to the alarm clock, like that type of music is diegetic. So the character is actually hearing that song as well as the audience, versus something that's just incidental or underscoring where it would be in the background. I think some of the best soundtracks probably use more of the incidental music, unless it's like ramping up to pump you up into something. Thinking like Living in America, for example, from Rocky IV, which we'll get into in a little bit, I think is a really great use of like pumping up the audience, but it's not actually heard in the actual movie itself by the characters.
Oh, yeah, because Rocky was famous.
Where Power of Love is on the radio when Marty wakes up in the morning. So it's actually heard by Marty McFly inside the movie, which is diegetic then.
And another differentiation is, while a soundtrack that contains songs can have songs that didn't even play in the movie, a soundtrack, or whatever Aaron wants to call it, an album that just has the score on it, that just has a score on it, the score will only include stuff that was played during the movie, the music that played during the movie. So you'll never hear a score in the soundtrack that was not actually played during the movie. But you can have songs on there that weren't. And
you got to remember, the credits are part of the movie. Don't just skip out and leave because the credits show up on the screen. Pay appreciation to the people that are there, because the song in the credits is always on the soundtrack.
Wow. Got scolded.
I was going to say, I feel like I just got lectured for doing something wrong.
I know. I saw all those people stand up at the end of Top Gun. They were like, aftercredits.com. Nope. Okay, we out. Peace. Got to go to the bathroom. Aaron was one of those people.
I had to pee, man. I left. Yeah, I bolted. I'm not going to lie. Pew. My breath was being taken away because I had to hold it, so I didn't pee.
Do you think there's a count out there for the original Top Gun of how many times they played that song in the movie, though?
Which one?
Take My Breath Away.
In the first movie or any?
Yeah.
What do you mean a count?
They reuse that song like 14 different times.
I mean,
well, that's a really great. It's an observational piece because sometimes when you write music for a movie, you're actually using pieces of that song. A great one is the Karate Kid. The whole the three notes, do 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 do, like that is actually in the song. That is actually in the end credits sequence, actually, and then they built the entire motif. So as you listen to some of the scoring or the incidental music that's in the background, you'll hear that in Daniel's theme, like when he goes from his hometown to Reseda as they're traveling across the country, you'll hear those three notes actually played inside of that song as they travel. And so you use some of that to score specific moments or feelings, and then eventually you'll hear it later on. A really great example of this is Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, when they're on the side of the mountain and Sam is the whole like, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And you hear this like bum, 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 bum. French horn comes in like real powerful. And then that ends up being Annie Lennox's Into the West, which is played at the end of the movie over the credits.
Yeah, very astute you are. When you were talking about the score and soundtrack differences and how now they're called the same thing, I'm wondering, like, was a composer offended or something? And he's just like, you call my score a soundtrack. It's the same thing to me. That's the only thing I could think of. Well,
I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, here's your $5 pay to the jar for Troy's Blacklist podcast comment. But they actually did release a soundtrack for the Blacklist for season 1. And then they actually released Dave Porter does all of the underscoring for the show. And when they did release Dave Porter's album, it was called the Blacklist Score by Dave Porter, not the soundtrack.
They did that with Miami Vice, too, in the 80s.
Yeah.
So that's not the first time, man. That's always been a thing. All right, so back on the 80s. Think back on that decade. And it's going to be interesting because, Troy and I are from that decade. Amanda, I dare think you are not. You're 90s.
How did I know my age was going to come up in here?
No, it's just a fair, I think it'll be interesting because your choices may be different because the movies are more like you saw them after they came out. And I don't know if that makes a difference.
Full disclosure, almost all of my first choices are Troy's. So what I think is funny about that is that
he'd already taken
even though
them?
I didn't,
He had already taken them. Is that what you're saying?
He did. But what I mean to imply by that is that even though I didn't grow up in the 80s, because those movies and soundtracks were so iconic, they became iconic for later generations too. Like they persisted the sands of time. So younger generations to yours and Troy's still cling to the same soundtracks. They still say, no, this is superior to all the others.
Well, most of mine people probably don't know very, very well, but
that's probably true because you like more obscure stuff and different stuff.
But it's interesting because Amanda is enjoying the music from the movies because of the movie, where Aaron and I most likely heard the songs first and foremost on the actual radio, and then saw the movie and went, "Oh, hey, that's that song from the radio."
That is a good point. There are some.
Not for me. I was a movie obsessive. Most of the music I listened to was either rap or from movies. That's how I grew up. Sorry.
I definitely identified I will think back and say, oh, I recognize this song or I know this song or I love this song because of the first time I heard it in this movie. And I think that's what Troy is saying, at least for mine and his experience, is that he may have heard it on the radio and then he's watching the movie and he's like, oh, yeah, I know the song. I can't believe they put this in here, versus me who's like, I might hear it years later on the radio or somewhere else. And I'm like, oh, that takes me back to the time I watched XYZ movie, sure, Breakfast Club or whatever. The song and the movie are synonymous together for me personally.
And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition because like, even though I heard Power of Love, Huey Lewis and the News on the radio first, then saw Back to the Future. Now, if you talk to me today, I would say, oh yeah, it's that song from Back to the Future. It's not that song from Huey Lewis and the News. So it's a testament to say like how good that song was in the movie that you've now disassociated it from the album and actually tied it to the movie even later after you've actually heard it from the album the first time.
That's interesting.
And I think that's where we come to the thought of one-hit wonders from these songs on these soundtracks. Some of them have other hits that did well, but because they just, none of their songs stood to the same level that they did when they had, Power of Love, let's say, in a movie in Back to the Future. It's just not the same. They don't have anything that gets to that same level. Very rarely, if you have a super big hit in a movie, a song that gets into a movie and it becomes synonymous with the movie, do you have another song, a different song, different movie, same movie, whatever, that is equitable, that is just as well known, that is just as popular? Like, it just doesn't happen. And so when those movies have their quote unquote one hit wonders, I feel like those artists kind of peak.
See, you guys are making me feel super weird because when in the 80s particularly, because that's my as a kid growing into my teens, I didn't listen to the radio hardly ever. I mean, we were very, very poor. So I listened to the music that was around me, which was typically rap. Or movies, because I was obsessed with movies. So I usually learned about the songs from the movie. Power of Love, learned from the movie. I mean, all the songs that you're going to talk about, I saw the movie first, most likely, before I ever heard them on a radio, because I really didn't listen to much radio. I read more than I read, watched movies, but I watched so many movies. And I almost every freaking album that I had, or cassette tape, to be perfectly honest, with cassette tape, they were soundtracks. Almost my entire collection for most of the 80s were soundtracks. Like, that's what I listened to. I know more songs from movies than I know from just genuine pop radio, which is probably not the norm, but that's how I grew up. So I can identify. I mean, I love so many weird little songs from movies. I mean, I was going through all this and there were so many, just like so many soundtracks. I wish we had a 6-hour episode, because I would actually probably dive into a bunch of them, but that's more like independent songs. So made it a little easier to narrow it down to soundtracks I love. But all the ones that I grew up on with, man, I never heard on the radio. I mean, I would hear them on the radio like after the fact, maybe if we were in the car or something, but they didn't register with me until I had seen the movie. So I'm sure I'm different, but I was also a huge cinephile, and probably creepily so. Like, I watched too much. You know what I'm saying? So let's get into it. Troy, start us off. Tell us your 5 top soundtracks from the 80s. What do you think are the top soundtracks? And we'll take a breath before each one so we can actually discuss if we want to.
Okay, so all 5.
Yeah, just do your 5.
Rather than going round robin.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Top Gun obviously is number 1 for sure. But if there was a very close second, it would have to be Back to the Future, because it has been deemed like almost the perfect movie in most circles. And the soundtrack is no exception. I mean, it's really clever when you think about how the soundtrack came together in the first place, because Huey Lewis and the News, who actually wrote Power of Love and then was later asked to write Back in Time for the end credits, they never actually wanted to write for film and actually turned the project down originally. They only said, fine, well, whatever song we write next, we'll just give to the movie. So that's why The Power of Love doesn't have any reference to anything about the movie at all, other than maybe very loosely Marty and Jennifer's connection. But for the most part, Power of Love has nothing to do with the film. It was just the next song that Huey Lewis and the News wrote and gave it to Silvestri and the group in order to put it into the composition. And then when they sang Johnny Be Good at the end of the flick, which is actually Chuck Berry's song, in this version on the soundtrack, it's actually Marty McFly and Curtis Williams and the Starlighters that are singing it, and they didn't actually want to give Curtis Williams the credit for singing the vocal because they wanted to make sure people thought it was actually Fox that sang on stage. So Curtis actually doesn't get the credit for the vocals on that particular track on the soundtrack.
That's interesting.
That's a shame right there, because nobody thought that Fox was singing that, unless you were not a very intelligent person at the time, which is possible. Hey, it was the 80s, a lot of cocaine going on, crack, I don't know. So I thought that was a little, that's messed up. That's all I can say about that. That's messed up.
But at least they were honorable to the time period, because Johnny Be Good doesn't actually come out from Chuck Berry until 1958, 3 years after his cousin gives him a phone call in the movie.
So ridiculous.
How do you guys feel about the music that's crafted for a movie versus them just pulling songs to make a full soundtrack? Like, I'm more impressed by a soundtrack that has, if it's really well done and they made created songs for the movie, because I feel like that's much more difficult to find hits that can resonate with people versus pulling some of the best songs and, people are going to jive to it. Jive. I'm like in the 60s right now.
Yeah, man. It's more 70s. But I definitely prefer when they write them for the movie, because then I feel like there's a connection. But, you can't go wrong with a good collection of songs, no matter where they're from. And if you get introduced to new songs, like I had never heard Johnny Be Good up until Back to the Future, even though I still think it's messed up that they're implying that Marty McFly is the reason why he got it. That's just weird. But I don't think that scene would happen today, and it probably shouldn't. But I love a good collection of songs, and that always works well for me. But on the same token, I love when they craft them, when you're making a song directly for a movie, or a song that wasn't popular and just blends into the movie you're making, because that happens a lot more than you think. Too often people think, well, that song was written for the movie. Not really. They just went and found a bunch of songs, kind of like Troy was talking about Blacklist and Miami Vice. That's a lot of what they did, was they went and curated songs that were already existing that fit their narrative, fit their mood, fit the vibe, and then it became a soundtrack.
But you think it's something like Once, Falling Slowly, where that was written to be part of the movie. Like the whole movie was kind of crafted around that song, almost like A Star is Born 2.
Or any James Bond movie.
Or any James Bond movie, yeah. Where the title song is literally crafted for the particular title that they're actually making that particular time.
Yeah. Okay, so Back to the Future, that's a good one. It's a nice collection of original and existing songs.
I know that it's probably not the most common take, but I would actually say that is superior to Top Gun.
Definitely not a popular take.
I know. And
That's why I said Top Gun is number one, but Back to the Future is a very close second.
I'll give you a better hot take. I think Back in Time is a better song than Power of Love.
You know why? Because Back in Time was written for the movie and the movie story.
To me, I love the movie vibe of it. Power of Love doesn't really fit anything in the movie, except unless you want to talk about Marty's mom wanting to bang him, I guess. But Back in Time, I love that song. I think it's a great movie song. So
I'm glad you heard it, because it only plays during the credits and you would have left and went to the bathroom at that point.
I had that soundtrack, son. I had that soundtrack. Don't get mad at me. I had to pee. What do you want me to do? I had to pee. Maverick was on screen for 2 hours. I sat through Miles' goddamn teller. I did everything I had to do. All right. Except pee.
Also, Aaron, aren't you typically the type to never leave before the end of the credits?
I never leave before the end of the credits, but I really, we went and had a few cocktails before we went to the movie, and that was a mistake, and I won't make it again anytime soon-ish. All right, Back to the Future. What's next? What else you got?
Ghostbusters comes up next. Good old 1984. Soundtrack includes the Billboard Hot 100 #1 hit Ghostbusters, and performed by Ray Parker Jr., which is interesting because there were like hundreds of submissions for the Ghostbusters song in that part of the film where the montage happens. And surprisingly enough, the one that was going to be there prior to Ray Parker Jr. was I Want a New Drug from Huey Lewis and the News.
Yeah, which Ghostbusters stole from.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So apparently you're just a Huey Lewis fan. That's what you're saying. Not a little bit. He won a law. They won a lawsuit.
I love Huey
him.
Lewis.
Like they said, Ray Parker, you stole our song. And he's like, no, I didn't.
Oh, I know.
Oh, man. Yeah, totally stole it. But Can we ask you use that as a soundtrack. Now, I'll give you Ghostbusters, one of the most famous movie songs of all time. But as a soundtrack, do you like all the songs? I mean, I do like a couple of them on there, for sure.
Yeah, Thompson Twins is on there, right? In the Name of Love. You got Hot Night from Diane Warren and Laura Branigan. And then you got the standard Ghostbusters version. And then you also got the instrumental theme of Ghostbusters, which is really cool. But then you also got Cleaning Up the Town by the Bus Boys. I mean, all good, fun songs that you can just like jam out to if you got them playing on repeat in the background.
For sure. Just checking. I was just making sure that you weren't just like, you're just a huge fan of that one song.
No, Magic's good too from Mick Smiley. Next one I have is the Lost Boys. I mean, just the moodiness of this entire album, I think is really, really great.
Sax Man. It's got Sax Man in it. I still believe. Yeah.
Tim Capello.
That's a perfect choice. I love the Lost Boys soundtrack.
Best song on it. What's the best song in your opinion?
People Are Strange is good.
That is a good one. I don't know. I'm real bad about choosing favorites for anything.
Well, that's too bad, because I will tell you.
That's why I have honorable mentions.
I mean, Cry Little Sister's the theme, so I mean, I feel like you have to pick that one. But
Sister. Yep, and that would be one where you heard the music throughout, like as a bit of a background theme. Good Times is one of my favorite songs of the '80s, from INXS and Jimmy Barnes.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
INXS is probably one of my all-time favorite bands. I don't talk about them enough, but I freaking love INXS. And
so you loved 80s movies then? Because they were in like a lot of them.
They were, but I saw them in concert, man. Michael Hutchins was one of the best showmen I've ever seen. But
really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Fantastic. He writhed around kind of like Axl Rose, but with rhythm. And Good Times is just one of those songs where anytime I hear it, I'm instantly smiling. It puts me in a great mood every single time. I need to hear it more often. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack your love, but
not at all. All right, next one then I have is obviously Rocky IV, because I mean, living in America, sing it all the time. So good. And what's funny is that people think when they think Rocky IV, they think Eye of the Tiger was on this album, which it is, but technically Eye of the Tiger actually was made famous in Rocky III prior to being in Rocky IV. But Rocky IV is where it actually gets the most like play up, during the whole training sequence and everything. And then, of course, Hearts on Fire from John Cafferty is just a really good song, too.
That's a great soundtrack. And you're right. Eye of the Tiger, most people get that wrong, that it's part of Rocky IV, just because I think that's the more preferred movie. But it's from a montage in Rocky III, and it's one of the best running songs.
It is also on the soundtrack in Rocky IV. So you're not wrong by saying it's on the Rocky IV soundtrack. It just also was on the Rocky III soundtrack first.
Catch-22 is what that is.
Famous.
It's a trick. Amanda, has your generation seen any of the Rocky movies, or just Creed?
Oh, for sure. Honestly, I think a lot of I didn't really like watching the Rocky movies because I don't like boxing. It makes me sad and it makes me cry. So I always had a hard time with that. But growing up, always had friends who really liked Rocky. I think because of the survivalist story, and also just it was a very machismo story that dudes could connect with and also feel like there's some heroism in it. A lot of the 80s and even 90s, 70s to 90s movies where men were the dominant focus of the film, and there was a lot of action and all of that, something for the men to connect with. It was violent for not their choice. It was violent for violence sake, or violence for war, things like that. This was more of a man taking his own ownership. So I think men kind of finally had something to connect to where it was more heroic. That's my own opinion. So they liked it.
That's fair to agree. It's a great underdog story too, or at least the first movie is. And then I don't know how he can still be an underdog when he's a champion in the second and third and fourth and whatever. But. Because
he was the underdog to begin with and he just continued. I don't know. I guess so. But I see your point.
He lost in the first one. That's the thing people always forget. They think Rocky was a winner all the time. No, first movie he lost. So he wasn't a winner until Rocky 2. But after that, it's not an underdog story anymore, as far as I'm concerned. All right. So what else you got?
I got final one. Number 5 is, of course, The Breakfast Club. Which, honestly, is a horrible soundtrack. It really is.
No, it's not.
But
disagree, Troy Heinrichs. Hard disagree.
It's not like you put it on and want to play it all the time. It makes the list specifically because, as a Gen Xer, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me is the quintessential anthem for the generation. So because that song is on the soundtrack, it redeems itself. But I mean, if you actually listen to the whole soundtrack, I mean, it's not.
It's got Wang Chung, man.
In the world.
It's got Wang Chung in it.
It's got Wang Chung.
It's automatically awesome.
But it's not like the songs from Wang Chung that you would know.
No, not the songs you would know. I know the songs. Right. That was a great soundtrack. It's a good soundtrack with a fantastic song.
Yes. And also, this is the perfect example of how a song can literally make or break your movie, because the way that you use the score and the songs that you put into your movie can drive people emotionally. And it was, just everyone, when his fist went in the air and that song is playing, you immediately wanted to like jump out of your seat or jump off your couch, wherever you watched it and whenever you watched it. You wanted to change the world. You wanted to show people what you're made of.
I want to do it right now.
I know. And like every time I hear that song, I can literally see him putting his fist in the air. Like
every time you hear that song, you want to put your fist in the air. I don't care what it's about. You know, you could be at the grocery store and all of a sudden, if it comes on the intercom, you will see someone put their fist up. You will see some, and you just wish you had a trench coat on.
And I think that makes it one of the most iconic uses of music in a movie.
I would agree with that.
Because it's not only that the song is now synonymous with the movie, the song is synonymous with a particular scene, a particular moment within a scene. Like that is incredibly difficult to do.
John Hughes
where people
is great with
hear that and they're just like in that exact moment, that exact space. Like I have a horrible, terrible memory, but I will never not picture that entire moment in my head when I hear the song.
Yeah, it stands for overcoming my past trauma. It stands for overcoming high school. It stands for overcoming the patriarchy. It stands for just, good friends and good bonding. I mean, it just symbolizes so much in that motion that's just like, yeah, and you want to have that legacy that comes behind all of that when you end up walking off the field.
Yeah, I was Bender when I was in high school.
But you're not feeling that with We Are Not Alone from Carla DeVito or
No.
Didn't I Tell You from Lori Horsey.
No, I get
they're good songs, but it's not like you're like, oh, I got to go run to the Breakfast Club soundtrack to play Waiting by Elizabeth Taylor.
Here's the important thing about that soundtrack that you're missing is that Breakfast Club, the reason why it's so good is because it was representing various classes of your typical high school, and each of the song is a different element of those particular classes. So
for sure,
it's a good soundtrack in that it mixes and meshes a lot of various styles of song, and that's why it's so good. Good collection, man.
But you only get that the association to the movie. You're not just getting it from the soundtrack listening itself.
I mean, I get it. I mean, they're connected, but that's what a soundtrack does, right? But
like where you could just put on the Back to the Future soundtrack and just play the Back to the Future soundtrack.
God,
good stuff.
I had a weird Judd Nelson obsession when I was younger because of that movie. Because I wore a trench coat. I was a freaking rebel.
I was gonna say, was it a Judd Nelson or was it a trench coat obsession? That's really what the
all the
question
above.
is.
Because I went and saw Blue City, and I went and saw all of his movies after that. So I guess I had a little bit of a Judd Nelson obsession.
Point established.
All right, Amanda. What about your 5? What do you got?
My first one is probably one of my favorites because, again, it's synonymous with a specific moment in a movie. And it is the soundtrack from Say Anything. And
in
I think for
eyes, the light and heat, your eyes,
Peter Gabriel. Yep. That, I mean, just it made you also want to cry and do all these things. But also it had Living Color. Peter Gabriel's in it, Cheap Trick, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fishbone, like all Soundgarden, Aerosmith. I mean, like endless, amazing soundtrack. I loved it so much. And it's just one of those where even if you're not crazy about the movie, because I know a lot of people who are just like, it's a fine movie. That soundtrack makes the movie so much better.
Oh, I want to be back in your eyes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Next one is Pretty in Pink. This one probably wouldn't have made my top 5 list.
Well, hang on. I do want to say,
okay.
Back to Say Anything on a serious note. You mentioned Living Color. Cult of Personality, I think, is a song that's on that one.
Yep.
And Living Color, just so you know, my favorite all-time band. True story. That's all I wanted. Continue.
I'm glad you shared that vital piece of information with all of us.
And if you say they only had one album, you're wrong. They had a lot of fantastic albums, and their writing was spectacular. The reason why I love them is because they always had something to say. They didn't just write stupid love songs. So seek them out. They're just one of those bands I wish more people would rediscover their content. Okay, continue.
Yeah, because the movie was 1989. Living Color actually formed in 1984.
Yeah, they've been around
there's
for
5 years of songs from Living Color.
And they had many, many albums after that. They didn't just stop after Vivid, okay? I'm just letting you know they had a lot of albums. They're still making music today, actually. I bought a new album from them a couple years ago.
What's the song that they wrote for 9/11? That song breaks my heart into little pieces.
There's a couple, I'm trying to think of which one you're talking about.
Where he's talking about how she's in the building and that they were going to be, together.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Flying.
Flying. That's what it is.
Flying.
Oh my God.
That's a beautiful song.
If you want to cry, listen to that song, Flying by Living Colour, and keep in mind that it was written for 9/11, and you'll just spend the day real sad.
And Nothingness is a great song about mental health struggles. Just, See, like all their music, they were saying something. That's why I'm sorry. I totally went on a tangent.
This is a podcast now devoted to Living Colour.
Yeah. Corey Glover, you're my man if you're listening. Go ahead.
We'll be sure to let him know. Okay, so Pretty in Pink. I mean, John Hughes in general, I feel like pretty much took
Just
it away.
Nails it every time.
Everything.
Yeah.
He doesn't fail. But I really liked the music. Not necessarily where I would take this soundtrack and listen to it in my car as I'm driving down the road or whatever, but it was so perfect for the movie. Every time it had like the perfect vibe, if you will, for Pretty in Pink. And I feel like that is also something very difficult to achieve, to find something where you can feel like when you're listening to the music, oh, this is the movie. This is a representation of the movie.
Had an excess on it too, just so you know.
It did. Do what you do.
Yep. Do what you do, and it's spelled wrong, and I don't know why, but
we don't need English. It's fine.
I know.
So the next one I think will be on a lot of people's lists, and that's Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
I mean, you have the Go-Go's, Jimmy Buffett, you have Oingo Boingo, you have Billy Squier, all these amazing, Stevie Nicks, all these amazing songs and artists. And again, this is like I can't remember what the word is, penultimate? I don't know what the word is. Yes. It's such a great representation of like pop punk, which fit the bill for this movie. And because we're, what the movie is about, it makes you want to feel like you're going through a lot of different emotions, again, a lot of different genres and types of music. And it's a lot of like faster music, which I felt like high school was very just like one thing to the next, and your mind's kind of racing, your emotions are racing. And so the way that they used it and how they compiled it was fantastic.
It was also a time period where I think when you're talking about being in high school and transitioning out of high school and all those life changes, music itself was kind of having that kind of shift in 1982 where you see in John Hughes films come 84, 85, 86, you get the new wave kind of style of music happening in the mid 80s. This was kind of that shift from the 70s disco into that new wave as you pick up bands like Oingo Boingo, for example, where you're trying to blend the two styles. You get a lot of that on this particular soundtrack.
Oingo Boingo is, I don't know how many people know about that one, but Danny Elfman was the lead in Oingo Boingo, who went on to become one of the most famous movie composers of all time. Fun fact.
He is so talented.
Yeah.
And he has a song on my next one.
Well, hang on. Also, fun fact, I do not believe that the best song in Fast Times at Ridgemont High is actually on the soundtrack, and that would be the movie. I think it's Moving in Stereo, The Cars. That's the pool scene. That's the Phoebe Cates.
Ooh, you right.
And
let's be clear that Danny Elfman also made like the best movie and best soundtrack of all time, which is The Nightmare Before Christmas, and voiced Jack Skellington.
He's so multi-talented. It's insane.
But Oingo Boingo was the bomb in the 80s, man. Weird Science. There's a 7-minute version of that is fantastic, by the way.
So here's what we need to do. We need to make like a Nightmare Before Christmas type movie, but use like all those classics like Dead Man's Party,
Oingo Boingo song,
Weird Science.
That would be fantastic.
Who could ask for more?
I love this idea. Okay, so speaking of our dude, Danny Elfman, he has a song called Gratitude on the next album soundtrack that I selected, which I know Aaron's going to want to talk a lot about, so I'll keep my words brief. Beverly Hills Cop. You've got Junior, Patti LaBelle, and you've got Shalimar, Don't Get Stopped in Beverly Hills. Again, I mentioned Danny Elfman. It's a solid album. And also, I feel like a lot of songs that weren't super popular in Hollywood necessarily, that they were incorporating here and mainstreamed them. And I love that.
Man, the heat is on. I probably listened to a bazillion times. The heat is on. Down the street. But I listened to that soundtrack, you're right, man, over and over and over and over and over and over. Axel F. counts as a song to me. I don't care what anybody says. That's not a theme. That's
It is a song.
Yeah.
It is like
And I would
essential.
actually argue. Now this might be I don't want to say hyperbolic, but I would argue that Beverly Hills Cop 2 soundtrack even better.
I would agree with that statement.
Really? All right, that makes me.
I think it's also a better movie. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is much more fun.
Now you're drunk. That's not the case. But it's still I love that movie. I don't think it's bad at all. Beverly Hills Cop 3 is garbage. But
yes,
Beverly Hills Cop 2 is great. And the soundtrack, I Want Your Sex is on there. That's when, my God, when nobody knew George Michael was gay. So then they learned that, like, oh man, I love it. That's not what I thought it was about. Ha ha.
I love
gotcha.
that.
It was so fantastic. Shakedown, I could hear that song over and over. Shakedown, breakdown, take down. I would be driving in my car because I think that came out in like the next. No, it was a few years.
As opposed to driving in your wagon?
No,
I mean, what else would you be doing in your car?
I'm trying to remember. No, it had to be a bicycle or something because I remember just like having it on and always going faster, whatever I was doing, skateboarding, bicycle, whatever the hell it was. Years later, I would still play it. I listened to that soundtrack for a decade. I love the second one so much better, I think. But good pick, Amanda. The first one's a great soundtrack too. And Axel F, one of the best theme songs of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Still.
And my last one is from a film called Repo Man.
I can't believe you even know Repo Man, sincerely.
Just because of Emilio Estevez. I always like him. I've always liked him.
Isn't it weird how he was kind of huge, then disappeared, then came back from Mighty Ducks. Now he's gone again. I mean,
it's kind of sad. It makes me sad because I get excited and I get hopeful for him, and then nothing really comes of it. And it's also bizarre because I feel like a lot of people get excited for him to come back and make a return, but then it doesn't actually happen. And I don't know where this fall through is happening. I don't know if it's his choice in movies that he's doing, like The Mighty Ducks, or if he's just not getting the offers for other things to make a good return.
Maybe. I mean, God, we keep getting Charlie Sheen back when we don't want him. So
we want the other one.
Yeah, we want the other one.
We want the other one.
Yeah. But Circle Jerks is a great band, right? Coup d'etat, when shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
Circle Jerks is so good.
Black Flag is on there. I freaking love Black Flag, and I love that they have that on their album.
And Suicidal Tendencies with Institutionalized.
Oh my God, don't get me started on that. Does that count as a song, honestly?
It's so good, though.
It's hilarious. Also, and I did not look into this, but apparently the soundtrack has been removed from Spotify. I want to know why.
Which one?
Repo Man.
It's been removed?
I saw something.
It was repossessed.
Yeah. Stop.
That's amazing.
That's hilarious. What if that is just a stunt, like a play on the name? That's hilarious.
It's funny. I'm sure it's a rights thing. I'm sure. They're like, we want to make more than 3 cents a listen.
Probably. But that's my list.
Okay. So I'll knock out the 2 that people know pretty quick. There's 2 soundtracks that and this is actually, it's not because you guys stole anything. These are the 2 that I listened to the most as a kid and probably still have like as a continue. But the first one is the Blues Brothers.
Oh, excellent choice.
Just nonstop. I continuously listen to that. I love the soundtrack. I love the music. If you actually look into the history, they were really, really particular about ensuring that the original artists actually receive their royalties as per due, unlike, I don't know, say Back to the Future. They really respected the artists. They like Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi loved the blues. They loved the artists. They loved the songs. And they brought a lot of that element to pop culture that I don't necessarily felt like it reached pop culture until then. And it really just kind of like blew up in that film. All those artists, I mean, except for Aretha, she was already huge. A lot of them, the artists specifically were huge, but I just mean like it brought blues music to a whole culture who had never experienced it. And that movie was fantastic, ridiculous, but fantastic. Sequel was awful. But the soundtrack I could just listen to over and over and over and over and over again.
Especially when they redo the theme from Rawhide. That's what's
right. And everything just makes me enjoy that movie so much more. The second one is Purple Rain, which I will tell you what, while I was doing a lot of research and checking out some lists of what people loved and and I would see lists where Purple Rain wasn't even on there. And I just, as far as I'm concerned, it nullified whatever their list was. Because I'm like,
Yeah, because Purple Rain should be in the top 5.
it should always be in the top. That is one of the best albums of all time.
I was going to say it's iconic as a separate album itself, like unrelated to a film.
It's crazy how specific and amazing that album was. Tailor-made for the movie, sure. But that is a great, fantastic collection of songs by Prince. Let's Go Crazy, Purple Rain, Darling Nikki. I still love Darling Nikki. I don't care how nasty that song is. Like, the whole album is perfect.
When the Doves Cry.
Yep, when the Doves Cry. Everything on it's a perfect album. It's perfect.
And it's probably one of the only albums that's done soundtrack-wise by the same artist for the entire album.
True. I mean, Prince is a musical genius. I mean, the Batman soundtrack, I would actually give him a lot of props for that, too. It's unique and it's its own thing. But Purple Rain is just, I mean, seriously, I saw so many lists of soundtracks that didn't have Purple Rain on it, and it just made me want to write a letter to somebody and just scold them for how idiotic their writers are, or for how much they lack appreciation for one of the greatest artists of all time. Just insane.
It was also a huge break into mainstream pop culture. Like what?
I mean, he
what
was
that
already
album,
huge. He was already huge by then. But
right,
you're
but
right.
what that album itself did for music, separate from movies, just in entertainment alone, I feel like is such a huge feat that it has to make a list.
What really boggled my mind is that, as famous as he was at the time, and he continued to be for many years after that, he never repeated that. Because it's so much talent in that album that I expected Under the Cherry Moon would have the same effect and but it just never happened for him again. Like, that was just, for whatever reason, a perfect collection of the best of Prince, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the mountaintop experience. Because like you can have one,
Sure.
maybe 2 other good songs later on down the road, but you'll never get like a full album where everything
perfection.
is a number 1.
I can listen to every song on that album without a problem. Jungle Love.
It should also be noted that it inspired the movie. Like, an album inspired a movie. That's how significant and prominent it was.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So the next 3, probably less known. One, you'll know one song from it. But these are the other 3 that I listened to most, especially as a kid. And I was going through them today, and I'm like, God, I still love them. And it's almost shameful. Running Scared, the soundtrack to Running Scared, Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines movie. I love that soundtrack, especially, I remember listening to them on cassette tapes, and Troy, you'll probably understand this more than I think Amanda will. Just because I think you were in the CD era, right?
Yeah, but I still had cassette tapes.
Okay, well, you know how they had like side 1 and 2?
I had like vinyl stuff I had to flip over, man.
Yeah, man. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
8
side
tracks.
1 was the better side than
Always.
than this side 2 or side A and side B. Side A was always better. And Running Scared is just one of those where I always listen to side A, never really listen to side B. But side A, I listen to all the time. Sweet Freedom's on there. The Running Scared song itself is on there. There's a lot of cool songs on there. And I just want
to be loved, ready for the world.
Yes.
Again, you got some Patti LaBelle.
She was great, man. She's great. I'm sure she still is great. I don't know if she's still around or not. I hope so.
Kim Wilde was on there too.
Man Size Love, Climax. That was a band that I never heard of again, but that's a great song. So, I mean, a big fan of that one. The next one is a movie I love. I wish more people would see it. I think it's probably hard to find now, but it's Summer School, the Summer School soundtrack.
That's such a good
great
one.
movie. Such a great movie.
That's a really, really good choice, because it's not going to show up on any of these special lists that you look on online, but it was such a fun soundtrack.
And fun fact that I was today years old when I learned, E.G. Daly, who sang Mind Over Matter and Seduction on that soundtrack. And I had a huge crush on her in the 80s. Huge crush. She's the voice of Tommy Pickles on Rugrats.
What?
True story. She became a very famous voice artist. Mind.
I feel like I just also learned the information that Tommy Pickles was a girl.
So is Bart Simpson, but...
Yeah.
These gender norms have been changing for a while, guys, and we just didn't know it.
Yeah, she's a very talented voice artist, and it's crazy because I was watching the video and I'm like, God, I remember having such a crush on her. And then because I was doing a search and she came up on, I think it was Kelly Clarkson, and she's like, voice of Tommy Pickles. And I'm like, what? When the hell did that happen? And the whole time. She's always been the voice of Tommy Pickles. I didn't know. And a bunch of other cartoon characters.
Should mention that Denny Elfman is also on the Summer School soundtrack.
He is.
That's how cool Denny Elfman is.
And
Happy.
This is very important. If you go to search, find the Summer School soundtrack. I think it's on YouTube. It's hard to find the actual hard copy anymore. But the Happy song you want to hear is the one that's on the YouTube for Summer School soundtrack, not the Danny Elfman that was released a couple of years ago where he like remastered it, because that is a weird ass version that is nowhere near the song that I'm talking about. You got to find the Summer School version because it's fun, it's happy, and as all the songs on that soundtrack are. It's just
he just performed that song at Coachella like a month ago.
Happy? Mm-hmm. Did he do the dark and weird version? Because
I don't know.
Coachella, I would assume so.
But probably.
That's just weird.
We all need to go search this now when we finish the podcast.
Seriously, there is a remastered video he did that is freaking weird as hell. So, and because I hadn't heard it in a while, I'm like, I love that song. And I put it on, I'm like, that is not the song. That is not it. Not at all. This is Dark Elfman. Very Dark Elfman.
And if you have not seen Summer School, shame on you.
Oh my God.
You need to make that a priority this weekend.
Chainsaw.
For sure.
Chainsaw is the bomb,
Chainsaw
man.
Brothers. Yeah.
He's the bam. Tension breaker. Had to be done. It's just so good. My last one, it's a movie I love, and I listen to the soundtrack like a bazillion times. It's called Fright Night. It's a 80s vampire movie. I hope more people say, welcome to Fright Night. But Jay Giles Band, which is one of my favorite 80s bands, they had a cover song for Fright Night, or the title song, I'm sorry. And then there's Autographs on there, Ian Hunter's on there, Devo's on there. I mean, there's Brad Fiedel, who's normally a composer, really popular in the 80s. He actually took the theme from Fright Night and wrote a song to it. He's not a great singer, but I like the words. And if you've seen the movie, it really fits. So it's very cool. And Sparks, Armies of the Night is a great song. Like, I love the songs on this thing. Give It Up as a song where I love the scene that it's from. So when you hear it on the soundtrack, all it makes me do is think of that scene. And I love that movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies. So the soundtrack just makes me feel like I was 12 or 13 or whatever I was when I watched that movie. That's what it does every time I hear it.
And if you haven't seen it, you should totally see it because Tom Holland was a director.
Yes, he was. Different guy.
Oh, it's a different Tom Holland.
Yeah, I don't think he was an embryo at that point. So
I almost had the TNG. They were hanging on. The next generation was like, Tom Holland directed this. I'm in.
That's so funny. All right. So Troy, and when I say like do a speed round. You got any honorable mentions you want to mention before we move on to listener polls? Just fast.
No, because I mean, most of the honorable mentions after you get out of these like big ones here, I mean, it's the 90s has got such really great stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to the 90s.
It almost feels like we have to do another episode with 90s music.
Have to. All right, Amanda, what about you? Anything you want to make sure to mention?
No, I think we covered all the bases.
Well, okay, I've got a few. So I'm just going to throw it.
Back to School could be one. I like the Back to School soundtrack.
Back to School's good. That's got Dead Man's Party on it.
Yep, Dead Man's Party. Oingo Boingo.
Yep. I'll throw up. I'm just going to go through them. Just name them. I'm not even going to stop and give you too much anecdotes, all right? Sure. Michael Mann was a great curator of music. So Manhunter and Band of the Hand, both of those soundtracks, I love them, and they both scream 80s. Dragnet, Because City of Crimes, one of my favorite stupid songs of all time. Do the Right Thing, that's a fantastic soundtrack. Real Genius didn't have a proper soundtrack, but it goddamn deserved one because all the songs on that freaking movie are fantastic.
They're great.
Less Than Zero.
So is the movie.
16 Candles, Black Rain. I love the movie Black Rain. Batman, I talked about. The Goonies. I think Valley Girl deserves a shout out, which ironically had E.G. Daily in it in a small supporting role. And also played the mom in the Valley Girl remake. What? Crazy world. I'm learning all kinds of new stuff. Cocktail, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We're talking about John Hughes. Twist and Shout, one of the most iconic music moments in film history. Beaches, Maximum Overdrive, AC/DC album. It's basically what it is. It's great. And Flash Gordon. Gotta mention Flash Gordon. Such a weird.
Do you though? Do you though?
The universe.
Yep. Okay, so now let's do.
For every one of us.
Let's do the listener top 10 from our poll that we put on Facebook, which we always put our topic on Facebook. And this saddens me that number 10 is Purple Rain. It saddens me, people. It saddens me. Seriously. Number 9, Beverly Hills Cop. Number 8, The Blues Brothers. Number 7, The Breakfast Club. Number 6, Ghostbusters. Number 5, Dirty Dancing. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's probably more beloved by other people than us. Sounds like, right? All right. Nobody puts Baby in a Corner.
I mean, the movie's, I don't know if I'd like run to go listen to the soundtrack. That's the problem with that movie. Like,
I feel like it's one
itself,
song.
What? She's Like the Wind? Or A Time of My Life?
Time of My Life.
Sorry, too soon? Let's see. Number 4 is The Lost Boys. Number 3 is Back to the Future. Number 2, Footloose. Everybody cut loose. Footloose. Again, Kenny Loggins, freaking master of the soundtrack, the 80s soundtrack songs.
Honestly, I feel like because I didn't grow up with that movie, I grew up constantly hearing it and hearing the soundtrack that I'm to the point where I can't freaking stand that soundtrack. I'm just so over it because I wasn't even a part of that era, but I've still been forced to endure it like I was. Like, I'm just over it.
Fair enough.
Kind of the rest of us that are just trying to let that other one go.
Yeah.
The number 1 soundtrack is Top Gun. I will say, I think there's a little recency bias in that, but it is.
There could be.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't mention was Flashdance. Flashdance has got a good soundtrack too.
We didn't. Fame had a good soundtrack.
Fame.
There's a lot of stuff that had. Irene Cara, man, she was great. I loved her. Okay, so that's it for our main topic, but we got a couple other things to get to. But before we do,
I do want to make a plug.
Never mind, I'm not done
yet.
Go ahead.
Can I make a plug?
Sure. You're going to anyway.
No, we don't want to tout other podcasts on the show.
Oh boy,
but
here it comes.
For this particular topic, I have to stress that you have to check out the soundtrack show with David W. Collins. It is just fantastic. I've talked about it on this podcast before. If like just all of these ones that we've talked about today, he's covered, I think, on one of his like series that he does. Like he did a 3-part series on Karate Kid and a 3-part series on Home Alone. Like you have to go check it out. It's like if you enjoy music and movies, you will experience the movies completely differently after you hear his analysis on some of these things. It's really, 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 really good.
All right. Did you check clear? You good?
I'm good.
All right. Any recent film or TV recommendations we haven't previously talked about? I know, Troy, since you were already talking, and I know you love to, Obi-Wan. You've checked out, I think it's the first couple episodes that are out now.
Two have dropped so far.
Is it worth? Because I got to be honest, man, after Boba Fett, I am just not excited about Star Wars.
I am telling you right now, like everybody was like, well, what are they going to do? Is just going to like sit and watch Luke from the side of a mountain in the desert for like 6 episodes? No, actually, there's actually a really interesting thing that happens, especially in episode 2. You actually get to see young Princess Leia. And there's actually a really great sequence between Obi-Wan and young Princess Leia where they actually meet up.
See,
and he has to save her from some kidnappers. And
that's turn off.
The actress that plays young Princess Leia is super adorable and super witty and super spiteful. And it's actually really a lot of fun.
That
really
is a turnoff for me because I'm sick of Skywalkers. But I guess if it's Obi-Wan, you're probably going to get some, right?
It's got to be Skywalkers. Yeah. But I should say that Obi-Wan takes place 9 years before New Hope, where I believe...
It's a rough 9 years for Ewan.
Right.
For Ewan?
I'm just saying because 9 years later, he looks a lot rougher in New Hope. But
and this is important because there's like something that happens at the end of episode 2 that's got a lot of people up in arms. But since this takes place 9 years before New Hope and Star Wars Rebels, the cartoon, which a lot of the characters from Star Wars Rebels are popping up in Obi-Wan Kenobi because of the time period and the Order 66 and how that all plays into it. There's some continuity things that might be causing some Star Wars fans to lose their stuff on the internet. So
what doesn't make Star Wars fans to lose their stuff on the internet?
I'm just saying there's a big thing that happens at the end of the second episode that's going to make you go,
Someone could have the wrong hair color and Star Wars fans would revolt and say that someone needs to lose their job.
Does The Mandalorian show up for an episode? Because then I might check it out.
Not yet.
That's episode 5.
But everybody's great. There's a singular Darth Vader shot in the first 2 episodes. So there's enough here that it's interesting enough to want to check it out for sure.
All right.
Especially the whole like what has happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi in the years since Order 66 and where we are now, and what kind of a person is he? What does he still stand for? What does he believe in? So there's a lot of like introspective, like him trying to get out of a funk to get back into what he was fighting for and the purpose of it all.
I got to ask a question. Amanda, you brought up a good point. When did Star Wars fans become Zack Snyder fans, essentially?
When the new set of films were released.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Attack of the Clones, when Attack of the Clones was S-H-I-T.
I'm glad you spelled it for us.
Like our listeners can't spell or something? Or like the AI system can't spell?
I was just making sure that it was like enunciated every letter because that's how bad Attack of the Clones is.
Oh my God, that's funny. Amanda, is there anything recent before we go to Top Gun Maverick that you want to mention?
I watched something really weird, but it was actually decent. As Above, So Below. My girlfriend was talking to me about the Paris catacombs and all of the weirdness. I didn't know it was real. I did not know any of this. And so essentially something happened a long time ago, and you can actually visit it. It's underground, and it's lined with like 600 or 6 million skulls, like actual decrepit bones that are still there, skeletons. And the movie is kind of like a Blair Witch Project sort of thing. Like, hey, we're going to videotape ourselves going through this, and things get really wild. It's a very horror movie for sure. I would recommend you check it out if you're looking for something to watch. You can rent it for just a few bucks on Amazon Prime, although, I wouldn't say don't get your hopes up of it being something spectacular, but it was a fun watch, and it will make you want to learn more about this weird-ass catacomb situation.
Excellent. Well, all I've got is Stranger Things, but we're going to talk about that after Top Gun Maverick because we're going to jump into some spoilers. So we'll hold that until after Top Gun. Right now, we're going to talk about Top Gun, but first I want to make sure to tell you that our website is thehollywoodoutsiders.com. Our Twitter is @bypopcorn. We have a Facebook group. It's private. You can find it, The Hollywood Outsider. You can rate and subscribe us on your preferred podcast app. If you do have time, please do that. Spotify, iTunes, whatever. It really does help the show. It'll only take you a second. Please do that. You can find John's artwork on Insta and Twitter @rjohndraws, Amanda on Veronica's Marshmallows and Smirk, and @Sink Into This, Troy @Troy Heinrichs and The Blacklist Exposed and Beyond Westworld, and me, I'm presenting Hitchcock and @Aaron Smirks on Twitter. Top Gun Maverick. Okay, so we're going to do little bitty spoiler-free, and then we're jumping into some spoilers because we want to talk about this movie. So it's been over 30 years since Top Gun, and Pete Mitchell is still causing a ruckus. He should have retired. I was in the Navy. I promise you, he should have retired. Makes no sense that he's still in the Navy. But anyway, apparently Maverick can't stop that loving feeling of flying jets. And after he pulls yet another stunt, Maverick is essentially grounded and called back to Top Gun by his former foe and now friend, Iceman, to teach the best of the best and train them for a mission that looks to be a suicide mission where no one who goes can make it back alive. Can Maverick alter the course? Especially when he learns that Goose's son happens to be one of the pilots training and even has his dad's mustache, which is odd. Okay, spoiler free. Just real quick, overall thoughts on your score, if $10 is the full price of admission, of Top Gun Maverick, and then we're going to jump into spoilers, so anybody that hasn't seen it, be warned. We'll tell you before we get there, though. So overall, Amanda, and score.
Okay, so before I say anything, because I know everybody's going to jump my bones as soon as I speak, because this has Tom Cruise in it.
Speak for yourself.
It's not that kind of party.
Ew, okay, not like that.
Can't bring any keys to this one or anything.
Anyway, I do not typically enjoy Tom Cruise. I didn't mind him in the original Top Gun. I've seen it before, and I thought it was all right before. I will say that I actually think I enjoyed this one more, and I enjoyed Tom Cruise's performance more in this one. I, with the exception of Miles Teller, feel like the cast overall was pretty well-rounded.
Well said.
Miles Teller was not as, I do feel like we need to say this though. Miles Teller was not as bad as Miles Teller usually is through the majority of the movie. In the beginning, it's a little rougher than that it was basically meeting my expectations for him in the beginning, but he got better as the film went on.
Yes, he excelled at mediocrity as he went on.
He excelled at mediocrity. Yes. But
the more time the movie went along, he was wearing a mask, so it was better. So
it did. Oh my God, his mustache was so bad.
The mustache was a little distracting.
His whole face was just, it hurt me. It hurt me to look.
Well, hurry up with the overall so we can get into spoilers.
I'm going to give this one 7 out of 10. I would go see it again.
Okay. Troy?
I mean, it drags a little bit in the front. I'm not going to lie. It's got some good setup. The training stuff was fun, but probably could have been a little bit less. But there's some really good touching stuff in here. I mean, I cried a few times, pretty heavily at the end. So being that I'm an old man and I could still be like, oh my God, it's awesome. And the experience of seeing it in the AMC Prime Theater when those afterburners kick on, $8.50 because of drug in the front.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you. A little bit of a drag there in the front, although the
not the opening. The opening is great.
The opening is great. Yeah, it's after the silent plane, and he gets to Top Gun. And he's kind of like finding his footing and stuff. But I will say, the last 45 minutes, some of the most exciting shit, SHIT, that I've seen in a long time. I was
for sure
stoked. So I'm giving it 850, and almost exclusively for that last 45 minutes because it has a phenomenal ending. It really does.
The first 15 are really great too. Like just some of the cinematography and what happens in the first 15 minutes is just breathtaking, and just the intensity you feel like right out of the gate. But then when it goes into like hey, now you're going to Top Gun, and it's like, okay, it's basically the same movie as before. Yeah, it kind of loses a little bit of oomph until the actual mission happens.
Crazy.
You could say it almost looks like a mountaintop experience into a valley and then another mountaintop experience, potentially.
You could say that. And
you're just as cheesy as the 80s version.
I think so, too. Yeah, I think so. And the jets were awesome. I mean, you actually get a throwback to, was it the F-14 from the first movie?
Yeah, F-14s do make an appearance.
Yeah. But you also get some F-18 action, so it's pretty fantastic. So
all of those scenes, and I know we're going to talk about them, but for the people who don't want to be spoiled, are freaking insane. And the fact that they really did that just blows my mind. I cannot imagine.
You know what? Hey, hold on. Let's get into it, because if they haven't seen it...
Well, people may not want to listen to the spoiler part, but it's nice to know that it was real.
Tough SHIT. That's what I say. Go ahead.
The camera work for the fighter jets is just another level.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Amanda. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, imagine taking a job and being like, oh, I'm going to go act today. And then they're like, by the way, in the next 8 weeks, we're going to teach you how to fly a plane and do crazy little stunts in the air. And we're going to attach the cameras to that. Okay.
Yeah.
And throw so many G's at your face that you're going to basically throw up every time you come to work.
I saw Miles Teller complained about it already.
Did he really?
I almost died. No, you didn't. You had a brilliant pilot in front of you who kept you alive. You shut up. Sorry. All right, spoilers are open. So now we're talking about the movie. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend cutting this off or skipping ahead to Stranger Things if you already saw that, and that's what you want to hear. Whatever. This is Top Gun Maverick. Spoilers free. You can check the episode info for timestamps. It'll tell you when the Stranger Things portion starts. Okay. So let's start with the other pilots not named Rooster. Phoenix, Bob, Payback, Fanboy, Hangman, etc. Any standouts for you in particular that really caught your eye?
I mean, Hangman, obviously, but Hangman is like the quintessential Iceman replacement for this movie, if you will.
Yeah, but Glenn Powell is a great actor. Like he's Everybody Wants Some? That was a great movie. He's stellar in that. And Scream Queens, he's great in that. I love him as an actor. He's fun.
Yeah, everybody else was just kind of like playing like their roles. It wasn't like they stood out at all.
Cliches.
Sad that there was only one female pilot in the entire group. I thought there'd be at least 2 female pilots, if not more. So that was kind of maybe a letdown on the casting part. But at least it was a diverse cast.
Amanda, how about you? Any standouts except Rooster?
Yeah, I feel like I don't feel like it's due to the actors by any means, because I feel like they all did a nice job. I liked Phoenix, but again, that's to Troy's point. I liked having a woman to connect with. And so that was, I got excited to even see one like that. I don't know if that's just sad. I think it's kind of sad. I was thinking about that after where I was looking at it and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited they actually have like a woman in here. So I can, I don't know. It's just nice to see that on screen. But I didn't feel like they were written in a way where they were made to stand out necessarily. I feel like it was written where they were all supposed to be kind of like Troy said, cliche and kind of generic and mediocre, which was fine because they wanted these other 3 to stand out the most. They wanted Hangman and Rooster and Maverick to stand out more than anybody else.
They were montage characters. That's what they were.
Yeah,
they were people
sure.
that are great in a montage, but they didn't really pop outside of that.
Although it was great that Bob, the nerdy guy, was the one that was actually the kind of the hero of the day.
It's Bill Pullman's son.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man.
I did like his line delivery in some of those moments. He kept things a little more lively to combat Hangman's very, very overt, aggressive arrogance.
I love him. He was
masculine
so
arrogance.
Iceman 2.0 is what he was. And
100%.
I did love that Maverick grounded him. He's like, no, you're not part of the actual mission team because you can't be counted on to come through for your team. And then he does come through for his team in a different way. Fun anecdote. I was reading that, for the football fight, the weird football fight that they had or football game that they had, which was obviously a nod to the volleyball game, that they were all the guys were, because they knew that this was their big, hopefully iconic scenes. They were all doing reps and push-ups and trying to get as bulked up as they could before they filmed the scene. And Monica Barbero, who played Phoenix, she just showed up. She said she wasn't having any of it. They said she didn't want any of it. She just showed up. She didn't care about any of that.
She also was noted by the aviator trainer or whatever, aerial coordinator, Kevin LaRosa Jr. She was the one that impressed him the most with the actual piloting. He said, basically she handled things so perfectly and she did so well that's the one who he was most impressed with.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I also probably want to give a little shout. John Hamm, I thought was a good foe for Maverick.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I dug him a lot.
I was so happy to see him. I always love when John Hamm shows up. I don't know why. All right. So Jennifer Connelly, she's Penny Benjamin and technically is referred to in Top Gun 1. She's the Admiral's daughter that Maverick had an incident with. So there is a connection to Top Gun 1. It's not like it came out of nowhere. So what do we think about Jennifer Connelly as Penny Benjamin?
I mean, I like Jennifer Connelly. I don't think you can go wrong with the woman. I did appreciate that there was, all of this movie just felt like a replica of the first, if I'm being completely honest.
It did until the last half.
I know they make changes.
Until the last half, probably.
Yes, but a lot of it is still very, I don't know. It just feels like we're going through a lot of the same loops and a lot of the same processes. But I did like that it was, the romance was less obnoxious in this one than in the first, because 80s cheese was real hard in Top Gun 1, where Top Gun Maverick, his romance felt more mature, it felt more adult, it felt like...
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous in the first movie.
And also, you don't have this all
those billowing
music
sheets when they're having the sex.
Yeah, this
and
music in the
so
back every
tongue
time they see each other and all of that. So I appreciated that. And I liked that there wasn't anything really wrong with them that needed to be fixed. I felt like that would have taken away from the movie. It was just like they were just trying to show up and be there for each other. And then it was sad, obviously, when he had to leave. But she was still there. They tried to trick you out, but she, there was just no real drama between them. And I liked that. It was just fun.
Oh, and I liked her daughter. I mean, it was a nice relationship. Don't break her heart again. That was funny when when he drops from the window.
Drops from the window.
I like their dynamic quite a bit. I think Jennifer Connelly can't do wrong.
But I think there was a little bit in their relationship that was about him not willing to show up, right? Because
Sure.
It's a lot of what he's dealing with in his grief over Goose is that he's having a hard time just committing and being there. And you see a little bit of that kind of breakthrough when he's, flying the jet and trying to get to Mach 10. He's doing it for the team, but at the same time, Maverick's still about Maverick. So he has to have this relationship with Penny in order to really figure out, will I actually put somebody else first before myself? Because that's really what he's trying to do for Goose's son in the entire movie is put him first over Maverick's needs in a lot of that way. That's a lot of Maverick's character growth in the second film.
Yeah, it's sad it took him until he was almost 60 to be really selfless.
Yeah.
So, you're right. He's just constantly going. And it takes him getting grounded, basically. That's pretty funny. But even though I feel like the relationship probably took up more screen time than it needed to, it was nice to get a little bit of more of a human element and get, that's how you get some of the background between what happened with Goose's son and whatnot. Val Kilmer's return as Iceman. So, a lot has been talked about with Val Kilmer and the fact that he has cancer and whatnot. And so he can't speak very well. You can tell by his condition. It's very hard for him to talk. And But they found a way to work him into the scene, and before his character passes away, and also Iceman's instrumental in getting him back to Top Gun. I thought this was a beautiful setup and scene, and I thought it really, really delivered, especially with as limited as Val Kilmer is performance-wise right now.
Yeah, this is one of those points in the movie where you just lose it if you're a fan of the original in any way, shape, or form, or especially a fan of Val Kilmer's.
Yeah.
Just knowing that these two were just sworn enemies in that first movie until the very end. And then when you get the story in this movie about how every single time that Maverick was in trouble, it was Iceman who had his back and got him out of trouble and got him back to Top Gun. And then when Val Kilmer actually speaks in the movie, I mean, that was just like, part of it takes you out of the movie because you're just like, you're hearing Val Kilmer speak and you just feel bad for Val Kilmer. But at the same time, it's such a great bro moment that you're just like, man, I wish I had a friend like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at this age, someone that's just always got your back, always looking out for you. And he's always going to be there giving you the good advice. And he gives good advice in the entire conversation that they have, both verbally and non-verbally.
He also knows what he should be doing. It's just it's like a fatherly son relationship. I feel like it's surpassed friendship to the point where Iceman is really like, no, you need to be here. You need to do this. You're the perfect person for this. You've got this. Like, I will support you. I've got your back. I will make sure that you are involved in this and everything. And I don't know. It was just a parenting type of thing is kind of the dynamic that I got in a way.
True. Yeah, it's true. He's like, look, you're still a kid, apparently. So here, let me tell you what you need to do as an adult.
Yeah, but I mean, that moment when they're hugging, I think even if you're not a fan, if you've not watched a lot of Val Kilmer's work, if you're not super familiar with him, maybe you're younger, maybe you didn't watch the first Top Gun, one thing I will say is that this movie did a great job of filling in the blanks without it being a bunch of montages or flashbacks, which drive me crazy with these types of sequels years later. And because they had built up their relationship, and you can see that this man, I mean, his character in the movie is going through health issues, and you get that before you even see him. And so you're prepared for that. Regardless, I think it hurts you. It makes you sad. But for fans of Val Kilmer, to see him in that condition, to see anyone in that condition, that made me so sad. And every time I think about it, it makes me so sad. But I also feel like it's very honorable the way that they handled it, where they didn't shy away from his condition. They didn't try to, make an excuse for it or find other reasons behind it. They were just like, no, this is very real. The actor has a health condition, and let's write that in a very respectful manner. And it adds to the difficulty of emotion, but I think it's also a way for you to see Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer connect years later on their emotional brotherhood relationship that they probably have.
Yeah. I highly recommend the documentary Val, if you haven't seen it, on Prime Video. Just fantastic documentary about Val Kilmer. It was good to see him back. I'm glad they made that happen. Now, let's go to the most okay actor that ever okayed. As he should be known, Miles Teller. He is quite the supporting character in anything. Even when he's the lead, he feels like the supporting character. He's fetch is what he is. They keep trying to make him happen. Hollywood will not stop trying to make this guy happen.
Poor Miles. I do feel a little bit bad for him because everybody hates him.
I don't. He it's his face's fault. He's got that face. It just makes him, hey, he had whiplash, right? I mean, that's always what people throw at me when I say, well, I think he's just an okay actor. I don't think he's terrible. He's just okay. But they always, well, he's in Whiplash. I'm like, but do you remember him mostly from Whiplash, or is it J.K. Simmons? If you really think about it.
Do you know what it made me feel, though? Okay, so everyone knows that I feel like Tom Cruise is a very okay actor. He's not a bad actor. He's not a great actor. In my opinion, he's just an okay actor. However...
And you never miss a chance to say it. What's different about that?
Hold on, and neither do you about Miles Teller,
but
okay?
I'm correct. You are wrong.
But watching Miles Teller in comparison to Tom Cruise made me feel like, you know what? I think Miles Teller might actually be a bad actor. Like, he's not just meh. He's not mild Teller. He's just bad Teller. Like, he's not good. He is better here than I expected in parts of the scenes, but there were so many moments where I was like, dear God, man, why did they give you this role? Why did they encourage this?
Yeah, it's He's, yeah. I got nothing more to add to that. I mean, that's usually how I will say his performance didn't really bother me here. I feel like the mustache was a nice, clear echoing of Goose. He didn't do anything to hurt the film, put it that way. And much like I've always thought, I think he's just okay. I don't find him charismatic. I don't find him a very good actor. I just find him okay. And he just happens to pop up in all kinds of things that I don't know how he got the job. This being one of them. Because you got Glenn Powell, who I think is ferociously charismatic. And he could have
100%.
dominated the role. And I think they were both up for it, and they chose Miles Teller, but they just gave him this part. They wrote Hangman mostly for him. And I'm just like, you should have made Glenn Powell Rooster. You really should have. I think this could have been even more impactful. I think this worked fine, but I think it worked because Tom Cruise made it work. I felt he was fine as Rooster, but didn't really a lot of the pathos didn't come across for me. But I also am obviously biased. So, Troy, what do you got on old Miles Teller?
I think they made him too much like Goose and made him look exactly like Goose with the mustache, that it was almost a little off-putting at times in the course of the production. I like the character. I like the concept from the story perspective around why Tom Cruise, did what he did, and the fact that it was Goose's son. It just, the look of the character seemed a little bit off-putting because it kind of pulled you out a little bit just because of how much he resembled Goose in this particular movie.
Two on the stash.
Yeah.
But he didn't hurt it. Now let's talk about the big dog, the one Amanda can't seem to stand, but the rest of the world is a big fan of. Tom Cruise, who I gotta say, the opening weekend was in the States was like $160 million, I believe, for the 4-day weekend, $124 million for the 3-day, something like that. He's never had an opening weekend above like $65 million before this in a 40+ year career. That boggled my mind. And he's had hit movie after hit movie. So, I mean, that's really insane if you think about it. But anyway, Tom Cruise back in the cockpit. He's almost 60 years old, playing Pete Maverick Mitchell. What do you say, Troy? What do you think about the Cruise? Did he bring it? Because I would argue this might be one of his best performances in years.
Yeah, I think in this movie in particular, Tom felt like he made, instead of being, I don't know, above everybody or above the movie itself, it just, we're like, oh, it's Tom Cruise, and it's just Tom is glowing, and Tom is Tom, and Tom is there. I felt like this was the first time I saw a character really emerge in a long time from him, where it just, you got to the pain he was feeling of, doing the things he needed to do for Goose's son, the disappointment that he always ran into with Penny, and the fact that he always had to leave all the time, just his desire to push and do everything he could for his teammates and make sure the team wasn't disbanded, and that he would put his life on the line for everybody else so that they would be successful. There was a lot of good that he brought to the character this time around that actually made me feel like Maverick is a pretty good guy compared to the first movie, where he just felt like he was a hot shot, jockey, just, wants to get out there and prove everybody that he's just super awesome. This felt like a full, complete character finally.
Yeah, actually, I completely agree with everything Troy said. This does feel like we finally get a really good performance from Tom Cruise, where I feel like he has a defined character. It's not just Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise. You can see his emotions on his face without it being kind of cheesy, which historically I felt has been the case. He has a problem with actually crying. He teared up in this, and I was like, oh, okay, it felt real and authentic and natural. And it made you engage and feel sympathetic with him in his situations, while also, like, the moments where he's frustrated and angry, and you can tell he's just like, I don't want to listen to you. I don't care what you have to say, especially when John Hamm is talking. You buy into all those moments. You buy into why he does what he does. You buy into why, Goose's son is so cheesy. Rooster. Why Rooster is, struggling with the notion that Maverick did something behind his back. And you're like, how, why would somebody do that? That's pretty shady. But because Tom Cruise delivered, that moment where he explains it so well, you are like, okay, I can understand why he's doing this. He's doing this to be this kind of honorable man that he wanted to be, that Goose's death made him turn into. And that is attributed obviously partially to the writing, but a lot of it to Tom Cruise's performance. So the fact that I wanted to go back and see this movie again, I think speaks volumes coming from someone like me.
Well, two things. One, I think Rooster is a ridiculous name. I agree. It's a little too close.
They're
But
so cheesy.
it's better than Gosling, right? Because that's a baby goose. I'm just saying.
That's true. What if they had
More on the
Gosling
nose.
and it was played by Ryan Gosling?
Oh, that's too meta. I can't handle
No,
that much
I love
meta.
it. I love it.
So
Could you
meta.
imagine Tom Cruise and Ryan Gosling
That's
doing this movie together?
Even think how much awesome that movie could have been.
No.
Think how much more awesome that could have been. Oh my God. Yeah, there were specific scenes where because I have been a longtime fan of Tom Cruise and I know he can act. I'm sorry, Amanda. He can. He used to do a lot of dramatic roles before he stopped. A Few Good Men's fantastic. Rain Man is fantastic. Color of Money. He was wonderful in that. Like there's so many movies where he really acted but I agree. He hasn't done that in a long time. He's been kind of doing Mission Impossible, Jack Reacher style movies. And that's about it. I really felt like this matters to him. Like this particular role. And I think he cares about his movies across the board. Like I said in the last episode, I haven't ever heard from anyone that's worked with him that didn't feel that he gave his all. Like he's the first guy there, he's the last guy to leave every day. So to me, it was nice to see that he felt so much more impacted by this character that he had to deliver even more than he normally would, because he does have several emotional moments with Jennifer Connelly, with Rooster, even when he's having I gotta prove that I am the guy to lead this, right? Where they basically kicked him off because one of his pilots, lost the aircraft. Can't do that. It's bad. So he comes in and he's doing it under 2 minutes and 15 seconds to prove that it can be done. Even that, there's a lot of grunts and groans, like old man grunts and groans, it felt like he was getting across, I'm not young enough for this anymore. Like, this is harder on me than it would have been. Like, that felt to me, he was actually acknowledging his age to some degree, which he normally doesn't do in films.
Ooh,
like
he
this.
looked, you could see on his
yeah, he's
not
tired.
looking as youthful as he used to.
Yeah. And, in the scene where, he's in total Maverick mode where, they crash and everything else. And he's basically scolding him for saving his life and stuff. And then he also just goes and steals the F-14, which why would you have an F-14 there other than, hey, Top Gun needs one in this movie somewhere. A lot of that stuff, but all that stuff just
gassed
worked.
up, no mechanical
Yeah, of
problems.
course.
Like
Just
everything's ready to go.
Good to go. Good to go. We keep these babies ready to go.
Still
just in
had
case.
ammo in it, everything.
They never know when Maverick's going to drop by. But you let that go because Tom Cruise really, really carried the movie all on his back. And he even got a lot of humor in here. And there's one scene in particular where I thought he really, really delivered, not including the Iceman. I think the Iceman scene was great. He really, really got me misty-eyed in that scene. But when he's looking through the bar and he's seeing Rooster singing the song and, he's feeling that gut punch of how he kind of failed him, how he failed Goose. I felt like Tom Cruise really delivered in that moment, and it was a really important moment for the movie. So I props to Tom Cruise. He gave a real performance here. That leads me to the dogfighting. Now, most of this is real shit. S-H-I-T, Troy. Real stuff. Most of that fighting is real, and I think almost all of it is real. And there are some scenes where the planes are the jets, the F-18s, whatever, they're doing all of their business, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing on screen. The windabout one that I'm talking about, where he's going and they're just wrapping around each other as they head spiral down to the earth, that was phenomenal.
Oh, that was a good one, yeah.
That was phenomenal. And then the entire last 45 minutes. I mean, let's talk about the dogfighting, Amanda. What did you think about the dogfighting?
Oh my God, all of it was insane. Obviously it felt real because a lot of it was real, to the point that Glenn Powell got sick while filming the F-18 scenes, but he would go, this was a quote from the aerial coordinator, he would go and take care of his business and then get right back in the game. Of the most impressive things was watching how some of the cast were able to process that and recover themselves. This dude was so dedicated to making sure that he got things done that he was like, I'll go throw up now because this was pretty terrible, but I'm going to get right back in the cockpit. And I love that. And I love that you can feel on their faces that they're genuinely kind of scared or they feel really confident. And the way that they're choreographed, I guess might be the right word for this, is just beautiful. Like it truly feels like you're watching a little bit of a violent dance happen in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with the dogfighting is just the maneuvers to like the flares, like the way to avoid the missiles and anything that they could do to like not get a missile lock on them. I think a lot of that was really interesting because you don't see the flare option in the way that they did it in this movie with like flares and bank right and flares and steep climb and flares and dive to the ground. And it's just and then the way they shot it so you could actually see the flares arc and make the circle so that it would draw the missile in. I thought that was really fantastic. And then there was this one, I'm going to put on the brakes and he's going to fly right by kind of moment.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that moment. It was something totally different with this new technology they had for the enemy planes. We all of us in the theater just was like, what was that? Because the plane like put on the brakes, but then it did like a UFO spin turn thing to come behind him. And we were just kind of like, what?
Oh,
and
man, that was so
it was
cool.
It was just so cool. It was so cool how it was done.
And the inverted and the way that they inverted, and we actually, because the first movie inverted is a big deal, but just to see so many different versions and variations on how to fly inverted in this one, just shows how much further jets have come since the 80s.
And then just the appearance of the F-14 when you see it, it's just like how cool it is and how they take off on the runway for it. It's just,
you mean the F-18?
So awesome.
F-14 is the old one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The F-14, when they find the F-14.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
And they use it and they take off on the runway and just seeing the wings expand on it and like just like such nostalgia.
They did such a great job with like the spatial orientation of everything because you really felt how big these were. You felt how complicated the older models were and kind of simplistic the newer ones were. You really understood how terrifying, absolutely terrifying what their mission was going down and over and how difficult it was to get that laser pointed right and then get the missiles and happen to get out and just barely miss the rocks of the top of the mountain and all of that. And one of the scenes that I think like built a lot of really great tension is when the enemy planes come in and they're trying to pretend. Oh, it's so funny. They're trying to pretend like they're one of them, like, hey guys, what's up? And they wave to them.
That was so
and then
funny.
they get into like this formation and all of those moments. And I'm not and was never in the military, but it made me feel like, oh, this is like super military stance. Like they're talking about the formation. They're moving into a specific formation. So everything felt very intentional and deliberate and I don't know, just really well executed. Every moment had to be perfect. And you really got that across because of the way it was filmed, the way that the actors were responding to things. If there's not precision in every moment, somebody's going to die. And because they set it up with a character nearly dying earlier in the movie when they're doing their practice runs, you start to understand the gravity of the situation. And all of those moments that they're in the air has then becomes so built up with tension.
And you just figured somebody's going to have to die in this suicide mission, but the fact that they keep them all alive was great. And I really admired how they decided to show you through, basically a digital reenactment of what they had to do so that you understood. I feel like in the first movie, it was just planes flying against each other and it was cool. But in the same token, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, it was hard to kind of get your grounding. And here I understood what they were doing. They had to maneuver through the canyon, then they go up, then they go down, then they have to pull up and go against, and just go straight up the mountain. Like we had a complete understanding of what their entire mission was, which made it really, really easy to follow what was happening, which I love that part of it because I wish the first movie would have had a little bit more of that.
That's a great point.
So there you go. Okay. So any other final mentions before we let Amanda go?
Yeah, there's a reason why this movie was really good. It was because it is Star Wars: A New Hope in a lot of ways. You have an old man who is teaching a younger man the ways of everything that he needs to do.
I get it. So he's Obi-Wan, and sadly Rooster is Luke. Ugh, God. All right, and with that, Amanda's out of here, so we're going to move on to Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1. So, Ken in Chicago, again, next time make a request on Patreon, okay? So, we have Elle off with Dr. Martin Brenner, who is definitely not dead. You surprised by this, Troy?
No,
okay.
Not at all.
And this will be spoilers open, so if you haven't seen Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1, I can't help you. Okay, she almost...
Just 7 episodes, just so everybody's aware.
Yeah, there's 7. It was weird. It was originally supposed to be 5 and then 4 in the Volume 2, and then they changed it to 7. That was a weird change, but whatever.
That's because there's 4 episodes in Volume 2. They just squished them into 2 episodes.
Right.
Because of the run times. Oh my gosh, the run times in this season
are nuts. We'll talk about it. Hang on in a second. So after she split Angela's head open, that's when she leaves with Dr. Martin Brenner to kind of get her powers back. And I gotta say, like, are there no parents in the skating rink? I don't understand why nobody's coming to Elle's, benefit here.
There was no adults there. It was like all high school kids, maybe a few college kids, but there was like no parental adults.
But they had like the biggest bullying session since Carrie, and nobody can step forward and be like, hey, it wasn't really her fault. Like, she split that girl's head because she was kind of a bitch, right?
It was awesome. That's what it was.
So the other characters, Mike and Will, are off searching their feelings as they're on the run with Jonathan and his buddy. Dustin and Steve are back together. Love those two together, as Steve is babysitting again while Lucas, Nancy, and Robin join in, trying to save Max and others from the new demon, Vecna, who has framed new favorite character, Eddie, for the murder of several teens. And man, I don't know where to start, but what do you think of this new... Well, first, let's talk about the runtime. So you don't like this new runtime thing for the season, right? Where they're basically almost movie length most of the time.
Yeah, when you think about sitting down and watching a TV show, you have this standard 44 minutes, possibly 55 minutes if you're watching HBO, but there's like a time frame you're expecting in these things because maybe you want to get a workout in and you're going to watch it while you ride your bike or do some yoga or whatever it is you're or washing some dishes or what have you. Like, there's an expectation of like how long I have to watch this. And when it's like 123, 116, 108, it's like just pick one time and stick with the consistency, I think would be helpful. At the same time, tell a good story and tell a story you want to tell, because I think that's also a very valid point. The thing with this is that it was just like, at some point it's like, I gotta pee, especially if you're doing the binge. And it's just like the pee breaks are like built in to be like at like the 120 mark, and that's like in the middle of episode 3. So it's like I gotta go. I gotta pause it. I don't want to pause it.
Okay, I will say I did feel like they were longer than they probably... I don't want to say needed to be, because I never felt bored, man. Like, I was interested the whole time. So,
yeah,
more Stranger Things isn't a bad thing. To me, it's like, you obviously have more episodes here, so why not just call it more episodes? Why does it have to be number 9? Why not make it 11? There you go. There's a nice nod to your own show.
It's a fair statement.
It's weird. It's weird how they're doing it. But as to the show itself, what do you think, first of all, of the new villain Vecna, and especially that tie-in where was the kid's name Henry? Victor Creel's son, was his name Henry, I think. I
don't remember Victor Creel's son's name off the top of my head, because I was so like,
Vecna is.
What?
Because you and I both thought pretty early that or maybe it was Henry was the orderly's name. Maybe that was the name. But
just the same person.
Yeah, well, they're all the same. So somebody's a Henry. But the orderly that's talking to 11 when she's trying to regain her powers, or when she's reliving the past.
Regaining her powers.
Reliving.
I think that's the thing that's most confusing about this season.
A little bit.
Is that a lot of what we see happen in the
pre-season
room,
1. Pre-season 1.
It's actually pre-season 1 stuff, even though you think you're experiencing it as modern day, because you have to remember she goes into the deprivation tank.
Right.
So what you're seeing is actually a memory. You're not actually seeing current state. And so back in that pre-season 1 state, even though 11 looks much older because she's obviously living it as her current self, going through that memory recall, she runs into this orderly, and orderly is telling her of like there was a person that could do this trick, and it was number 1. And the minute he said that, I was like, oh, that dude's number 1.
Oh yeah, same here. I'm like, okay, so he's number 1.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. But I did not see the connection to where he's Victor Creel's son, who actually murdered his whole family. and tortured his own father. And then, becomes Vecna. Like, really 11 made him happen. So now we've got a full circle to connect all these dots. And I thought that was a great reveal. Do you agree with that? Or
100%. I think it's what saves the season, actually, because
saves
for a lot of the season,
what?
For a lot of the season, you're kind of like thrown around a lot. I think is one of the things that's kind of jarring this time around. You have the group of people that moved on with the buyers, right? They went out to California at the end of last season. And so you got, 11, you got Jonathan, you got Will, and their mom, and then Joyce. And it's just, they're all out in California. So you have like that group of people that are doing stuff. And then you have the kids that are now in high school. And so there's a jarring move there of like new high school people you're trying to get where are like trying to figure that part out. And it's like, oh, okay, they're in high school, they're in Hawkins, the gates have been closed. It's maybe a couple of years later. So they can get that, the kids look older because they all, are 45 now by the time they're filming this.
They are.
And
they're
then
buying beer.
You have the whole Hopper sequence in Russia where that's all going down. So it jumps around between these three different parts. So it's not just solely focused on Hawkins and the Upside Down and the things that are happening. So you have to kind of like play with those three things for 4 to 5 episodes before the really starts to get going. It's really episode 4 that really goes, oh, okay, this is what the season is about, and really ropes you into the stakes that are at play. And then like 4, 5, 6, 7, it's like watching a feature-length movie, all 4 of those episodes. Those first 3 are a little bit slow, in my opinion, until you get to episode 4.
Man, I don't agree at all. I love, minus the Russian subplot. The Russian stuff isn't working for me at all. I feel like that should have been half of an episode, getting him back. Like, I just don't care. It's ridiculous how he survived.
Because it wasn't as cool of a reveal. I think that's what it was. Because like at the end of last season, you're like, oh, well, this just makes so much more sense. He like jumped into the Upside Down, into the gate, came out on the other side. And then when it's revealed that all he did was get blown down to a floor below. Stupid.
That's stupid.
Like, just dumb.
Wait, so she didn't think to just check real quick. Maybe he's on the ground. Maybe he hit the turf. And I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you survive an explosion that just wiped out all those people that were there? But he survived. That's a dumb explanation. You're right. The Upside Down and coming out in Russia is what I think everybody kind of thought. And then you get the actual reveal and you're like, that's absolutely ignorant. That's an ignorant
Especially
answer.
because you see the Demogorgon at the end of the season.
Right.
So you're like, well, clearly they had a gate in Russia or wherever the prison is,
Yep.
Alaska or whatever it ends up being. Trying to pull that Demogorgon through, like, it would make more sense if the gate was in Russia versus capturing a Demogorgon in Indiana and then flying it back home. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, Alaska, you can see Russia from their house. They're in Russia. It's just, Alaska's really close. It's weird, man. That's a weird solution. I don't like that subplot at all. I still love the characters. I think Hop is always a fun character to watch, and it's cool to see him kick some ass, and it's nice to see a couple Game of Thrones nods in there. But in the same token, none of that is really doing much for me. None of that. The kids are where it's at. But all of the kid stuff, I'm enthralled by, especially Steve and Dustin. I want Steve to be the character that outlives many of the kids, honestly. I just find Steve to be the most riveting character and a goddamn hero.
Of him because he's the babysitter.
He's a goddamn hero is what he is, man.
Yeah, and he's going to get Nancy back.
I've been rewatching a bunch of Stranger Things, kind of like I was getting ready for this season, and I like this season more than 3, by the way. But it's amazing to me, like, how far that character has come, how far he's developed. And he's always the character, do you ever notice this? That he's always bitching about being the babysitter and stuff, but he's the first one to do the hero move.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't blink. He just does it. And
he's the first one to go through Watergate down at the bottom of the lake.
he's the one that saves Max. Really, the other kids were like, no, wait. And he's like, no, I'm calling it. She can sue me. And that's what gets him going on trying to figure out how to save Max, which I will agree with you. That is probably one of if not my favorite Stranger Things scene is where they save Max from.
Yeah,
Vecna.
the cinematography, the color schemes, the music playing.
The Kate Bush song.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now here, not to poo-poo it by any stretch of the imagination, but given Max's upbringing, her dad, leaving and then living in the trailer park, like I feel like she's not really a Kate Bush type person. For that to be like her favorite song.
I disagree. If you really listen to the song, I mean, she's going through a lot of emotional turmoil, and that's a really kind of almost emo song. So I feel like it fit what she was going through, because she really kind of blames herself, and she's really regretting. You can tell by the letter she's reading to Billy that it's a much more impactful moment, and that's why that song it's speaking to her. And I think we all had that when we were kids, right? We had something that we were going through something, and a song, we were just talking about soundtracks. I had it happen so often where the song would be speaking to me in a moment of struggle. That's what I think they really, really illustrated that moment well. And I also think I see so many people talking about, it's just great to show friendship and all that, which is great. But it was a great mental health moment, I thought. How they showed someone that was really just really stopped caring about life and was forgetting that there's a lot of people that love her in her life. And she was forgetting that. She wasn't seeing that. She was so depressed, she wasn't seeing it anymore. And even though they were still right there trying to do it, and it took her almost losing her life to really see that. I thought that was actually a beautiful moment. And Sadie Sink, I think, is the most talented of the young actors on the show.
For sure.
So I love the direction it's going. I've been enthralled with it, except for Russia. Every time Russia happens, I'm like, there's your pee break, Troy.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also not as 80s on the nose as like the last seasons have been. I feel like it's kind of like left the 80s factor to it and just focus more on the story.
Except for Mike's outfit.
Yeah. His outfit's pretty dated. Not going to lie. The other things that I think that are really good inside of this season, you get to see the town itself is kind of like, yeah, what's going on in our town? I'm kind of done with this. Like the town is finally starting to fight back against the upside down and the things that are happening. So it's great to see the town get involved.
And the parents are involved.
Locations within the town,
and the parents are getting involved.
I think it's good too. Yeah.
How do you feel about? I mean, so poor Eddie. They're just jumping to poor Eddie. I mean, I love that character. I don't know about you, but I'm really starting to take a liking to him.
And I like the writing around the whole. Well, Eddie might not be the one doing the killing, but he's like the possessed channel for the devil's cult or whatever. And they call it the Hellfire Club.
That's a total 80s, total 80s thing too. That was big in the 80s.
So like that part was really good. I'm really more enthralled with the 11 storyline as that was progressing and how she's like dealing with the stuff and reliving the memories. And you're like, cause when you come into the season, you're just like, well, what are they going to do? Right. The Mind Flayer or one of his, if it was not the Mind Flayer, it was at least one of his like really, really, really high up henchmen.
Sure.
And, he's dead now at the end of the third season. The gates are sealed. It's like, how do you get back to the Upside Down? So trying to figure out like how the Upside Down would crack open again, I think is a really great thing. And then tying it into this explanation of how the big bad was created in the first place, because they assumed that this person was like a lieutenant or a general for the Mind Flayer. And that probably wasn't that at all. He's just possessed by the darkness as he gets sucked into the first gate that 11 opens, before this show even starts. It's that original gate opening where Vecna actually gets created as he's getting sucked in.
So is there anything you don't like about the season so far?
Just how long the Russia thing's been taking.
Because he should have been out by now, right? I mean, it's 7 freaking episodes, man.
It makes sense. You're trying to build it up for the climax of the 7th episode and
get them all together.
This is where, we're going to like have the whole, like he's going to see Joyce and they're going to embrace. And it's like all the emotionalness is all saved up for the 7th episode. So you get it. So you got to kind of drag it on. And then you got to manufacture enough stuff for Joyce to have to do something. So the whole Yuri, the peanut butter smuggler storyline comes into play. All of that stuff is just filler to make the emotional parts hit in episode 7 versus episode 3.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. And I feel like there's maybe like one too many characters at this point. I can't put a finger on which character there's too many of, but I just feel like they've got too much going on. It's too busy to a degree.
Well, because you have like the original crew plus Max plus Robin plus Eddie plus they go find Susie. And it's just like, okay, like how many more like people do we need to add to the ensemble? Can we get back to the original 4 at some point?
Yeah, and it was weird how Susie keeps saving the world. Like it just feels like that's a very convenient plot device at this point. Like 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like there's one character too many, and I love all of them. I feel like Robin's a little shortchanged in this season, where she was just adorable and riveting in every episode that she was in last year, and this year I feel like they're just trying to make her fit.
Well, because she's not a love interest for Steve. She's trying to be best friends with Nancy. Well, Nancy's trying to figure out her crap with Steve
and Jonathan.
And it's just like, yeah, Robin's just kind of left as like the, hey guys, include me.
Yeah, and Will is just over there kind of being there's a lot of people talking about his sexuality these days, like is he gay or is he not? I mean, his mom alluded to him being gay in the first episode, so I just assumed he is.
And why is that even a story point or a factor?
I don't know. I feel like maybe he has a thing with Mike, or he cares about Mike, and there's a relationship there, and that there's probably some understanding that needs to happen before the end of the season or whatever. But maybe. I also think, if he is, he's great. If he's not, great. Just tell me the Stranger Things story.
Will's also the character that is the most, what do you want to call it, hampered, because he was the boy that was missing for the entire first season.
Sure.
So you don't get to know Will until the end of the whole thing is done. And so really the whole team became a team without Will. So now that Will's in the picture in the second and third seasons, it's kind of like,
it's awkward.
I don't care about Will.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. It's ill-fitting.
Can you just kidnap him again and just make him disappear? But
I did like the friend dynamic, because that was really important. Like, as kids get older, even if they were close-knit friends, you do find wanting to be popular. So you kind of like Lucas, he joins the basketball team and you want to go there. And they were also kind of jerks by not going to his game. It was like the one game that was really important to him that they show up, and they didn't do it. They went and played D&D together. Those kinds of things, those fractions happen in close friendships. And I'm glad that they're kind of addressing them, and it feels real, feels genuine. And the times when I thought Lucas might be doing the wrong thing for popularity's sake, he did the right thing, like leading them to Hop's cabin as opposed to where Eddie actually was, and actually trying to warn them. I mean, he didn't change who he was, which is what I hate in shows when they do that, where now I'm with the popular crowd, so now I'm doing the mean things. You know what I mean? Because that's not how real friends typically would do it. They'd still be real friends. They might just not be as open publicly as they used to be.
Even though he looks the most different of the entire cast.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Like, at first I was like, who's this guy?
Him and Mike. Mike looks like he's
Lucas?
37 years old, and Lucas looks like he's 38. But it still
looks like Mike.
Lucas looks like Lucas, I think, except he's got muscles.
No, Lucas does not look like Lucas. Lucas looks like he aged up a lot compared to everybody else.
He definitely worked out a lot. Everybody else is still eating Cheez-Its and freaking SpaghettiOs. And he's over there's like, protein shakes, baby. I'm an athlete. Great basketball win, too. And I do, what do you think about this satanic section of the town? Because D&D was seen as kind of like the devil's game back in the 80s. There's a long period where that was the case. And I know you kind of talked about it before, but how do you because I can see this really turning the town against the kids.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting thing that they can play off of for the final two of the season, right, when it comes back in July. Because I think there's a movement there that the town being all riled up and going after everybody. You don't see it a lot of it, because you end up seeing the cops come to the lake, not the townspeople come to the lake to find the kids. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting as the rest of this plays out, as they figure it out. Okay, once 11 comes back into the picture, once they have to actually go kill Vecna once and for all, how the townspeople are going to mess that up, I think is going to be an interesting thing to play with.
Okay. Anything you want to say more on Stranger Things before we call it?
No, and actually I felt like, I don't know if it was just because it was 7 episodes, even though all the episodes were longer, I felt like the binge this time around was easier than, say, season 2 or season 3. Like season 2, it just seemed like it was an all-day affair. Like, this didn't seem like an all-day affair. Maybe because I broke it up over 2 days, but...
Well, I think for me, I mean, I'm such an 80s horror kid, so a lot of these really speak to me. But this is such a Nightmare on Elm Street vibe all the way through, for sure. Even with the Robert 100%. Englund popping up as Victor Creel, which is a nice nod. There's a lot of nods, obviously, to all kinds of 80s films, but to Nightmare on Elm Street in particular, because, first episode, I'm like, so the villain is basically Freddy Krueger? That's what I'm getting? And yeah, and except in this one, he can attack you when you're awake, which I really love. And you and I were talking about, like, one of my favorite moments, I think, in this first batch is in episode 7 where he gets Nancy, because it was a real play on audience expectations, really. And actually, episode 4 was too, because so many people were talking about how emotional they got. I just assumed that Max was going to die in that episode, and she didn't. Thank God. And I love that how she came out, made me cry. But the Nancy episode, so they're leaving the Upside Down. They're pulling out, which is very clever, by the way. Dustin,
the physics on it was awesome.
Dustin is a genius. I think he should just be running the show at this point. I love how he's like, yeah, when are you guys going to believe me? I'm like, always right. That's like a little huge, right? So they're coming out and you just know it's going to be Steve, right? You just know because he's the guy that's going to go last. So there's no way he gets out of the Upside Down. He's going to be trapped there or get killed or something. And it's Nancy, and it's a real clever play. Even though it feels like we should have expected it, it's a very clever play. And that's the one that got me. That one really got me.
Yeah, and the fact that it's preying off of your fears.
Yeah.
It's very much like not only the Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's also an it factor as well.
Yes, very much so. Yep. Good call. It's like a good combo between it and, which is still that Stephen King vibe that the show is always going for, and also one of the best horror movies of all time.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it then. So I can't wait for July. Was it July, right? July 1st?
July 4th.
1st. I think it comes out July 1st.
Yeah, that weekend, the holiday weekend.
Can't wait. That'll be all I do. Screw fireworks. I want to watch Stranger Things.
Exactly right.
And that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Ken, it's called Patreon. Go there. All right. Remember, guys, the next time you head to a theater, buy popcorn.